What's good, everybody? This is Pastor B, and welcome to another episode of the We Build Families podcast. This podcast is designed to create a space for Christians to talk about everyday issues that we may not have the opportunity to do so in church. If you're new here, please make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast. You can find this podcast where all podcasts are available. Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, all of those various different places. All right. We also have a YouTube channel as well. So make sure that you follow us there as well. So today's episode, we are talking about how to finish what we start. How to finish what we start. A lot of times we have lofty dreams, we have lofty goals, but many times those goals and those dreams aren't seen through to the end or don't produce the desired result that we wanted them to whenever we started. And a lot of times there are some practical things that we can do to kind of prevent that from happening. And so that's what we're going to talk about on today. So the first thing that I want to mention is that we should be intentional. We should focus on the primary thing or the primary goal. A lot of times, whenever we are dreaming of doing anything, the dream is normally larger and on a grander scale than the level of preparation that's required to achieve and to realize those dreams. And so the one thing that I've learned in my time here is that whatever your dream is, whatever your goal is, that particular thing should be your primary focus. For me personally, I'm not the strongest multitasker, but I know that in order for anything to be done, it does it does need a singular focus. It needs a primary intentionality in order for it in order for the foundation to be great and for for you to start on the right foot. So my first tip I would say is to be very, very selective about what occupies your time. Time is one of those things that is very precious. We can't get back, right? And so because of that, we have to be very intentional about what we give our time, especially during the beginning planning stages of any goal or any vision. Because without a proper foundation, no matter what we build, it may not last and may not withstand any storms or or heavy rains that come against any plan or any vision that is that we want to bring to pass, right? Secondly, is we want to make sure that we make proper decisions. This is something I've learned the hard way, is that every choice that you make has a cause and effect, right? Regardless of whether or not we know that at the moment, or if we understand that the smaller choices that we make have consequences. The larger choices that we make have consequences as well. The Bible says that we reap what we sow, and this is a simple principle that many people only attach that to finances, but it's a biblical principle that where if you sow time in preparation, and you will reap the harvest of longevity and productivity, right? So we have to make good, intentional, well thought out choices and decisions, because what we do sometimes is that we just throw ideas at a dartboard hoping that they stick, right? We'll start a project or start a new job or endeavor, without really doing the necessary homework because we're excited about this new thing. And it's okay to plan and fail, but it's unacceptable if you fail without proper planning, because the end result is something we cannot control. Like, we can't control if a business plan will work, right? If this great idea is something that other people will want to invest in. But what we can do and what we are responsible for is to make sure that we have done the necessary research, that we've done all of our homework, that we've invested time to make sure that this particular project is one that should garner the great success that we envision. Okay, so number one, be intentional. Number two is make sure that we are flexible. Make sure that we're not so rigid in the original planning process that we don't leave room for audibles, right? That we don't leave room for obstacles that may come, that may force us to tweak some things or to change some things, right? 2020 has been the year of the pivot, the year of making adjustments, the year of sometimes scrapping everything that you had planned previously and remaking your goals, remaking your dreams, remaking the structure of what you intended to do. And so this is November. So hopefully by this time of the year, you've made the proper adjustments. Me living in the church world, at the beginning of the year, of course, we had planned on doing all of these services in church, a lot of people, right? But then Corona hits, and out of the safety of the people, we limited the number of people in the sanctuary, right? And then once we were able to improve our digital media space, right, social media platform, we now do a lot of things pre-recorded and scheduled, not even in the sanctuary, right? So it's important that you always leave room to adapt, leave room to and make necessary changes, right? My pastor, Bishop Grant, says all the time, the world is for those who readily um, adapt to positive change. I really butchered that quote, but the overall gist of it is just simply that you have to be able to pivot, you have to be able to flex, and you have to be open to different points of view. Right. The worst thing that we could ever possibly do is to stick to a regimen, stick to a way of thinking that is proven that it doesn't work. Everybody else around you knows that it isn't working. Your team knows that it isn't working, right? Your family knows that it isn't working, but you are stubborn to your own viewpoint and your own ideas, right? It's okay not to be right. It's okay for us to miss. It's okay for us to fail. But what's not okay is to be stubborn and to ignore the help, right? Okay, so number one, be intentional. Number two, be flexible. And then the third one, I think, is the most important, and it's something that I've had to learn this year, is to be persistent. Being persistent simply means that you won't reach your ultimate goal within a week, right? A good quote that I kind of made up. I don't know if anybody else has said it, but something that I made up. It says the finish line doesn't move, just our perception of it, right? So the goal will be the goal, right? We will reach the finish line. We will accomplish what we have set out to do, but it may look farther away than it actually is, right? So it right now it looks like it's 300 yards away, and as we make daily steps and daily progressions, it seems like the finish line is moving, right? Because we can't see it, right? Many times I ran track for a very, very short period of time. And so my specialty was the 4x200, right? And so that particular race is not a straight race, right? It's one of those races where there's a curve at some point. And so if I keep running, right, at some point, my viewpoint of the finish line changes because what looked like it was very, very far away now becomes closer as long as I keep running. So it's important that that setbacks and disappointments do not stop our progress. All right. Um, like I mentioned, if you're flexible in the beginning and you see that one particular plan doesn't work, you have to make the necessary adjustments to make sure that your progress isn't impeded, right? We have to do that in our spiritual walk. We have to do that in our personal walk and our professional walk as well. Stay focused, stay the course, and don't lose sight of the ultimate goal. Um, this year, 2020, has been a year where I've stepped out to do things that I didn't really think was possible, right? This podcast is one of them. I started, I think, this podcast in April, I believe. And so there were times during the course of this year that I wasn't quite sure of what of like ideas for shows and ideas for show topics and things like that. And for a moment, I sat back and stopped recording episodes. Right. That's why this is season 2 instead of one prolonged season, because what I realized is that I didn't properly plan out the episodes whenever I started, right? But what I've learned is that as long as I'm intentional about the planning process and the preparation process, and as long as I'm flexible to if there's a guest that I wanted that doesn't that at the last minute changes their availability, I have to be able to flex, right? I have to be able to either choose a separate topic or maybe attack the topic solo, right? But the goal and the persistency of doing the research, recording the podcast, editing the podcast, right? Like, this is something that I'm learning even now, just to be consistent and to be persistent. Because like I mentioned, the finish line doesn't move, man. We just have to make sure that we are doing everything that we need to do every single day to reach that finish line. So this was a really quick episode today. Just something that I wanted to encourage everybody when it comes to your family, when it comes to your finances, to your faith, to your fitness, right? That we have to make sure that we set goals, right? This week, I want to grow closer to God, right? That's the goal. So how do we get there, right? How do we get there? Then, okay, I'm praying more. I am things that have distracted me from um, praying. I'm taking those things away, right? I'm reading my word more. I am, connecting with other people who can strengthen and encourage me, right? I mean, again, this can apply to every single situation in our lives. We just have to make sure that we are consistent and persistent throughout the process. All right. So, again, thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. Again, you can find this podcast wherever podcasts can be found. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, not only to the podcast, but also to the YouTube page as well. For all of my Apple podcast listeners, make sure that you leave us a comment or a 5-star comment and review. That's what I was trying to say. And let us know how we're doing, how we can improve this podcast, because we are wanting to grow. We're wanting to make this a larger part of the community. Right now, my goal is to have about 1,000 downloads by this time, actually by the summer of 2021. We're about 400 downloads right now, but we're going to keep trucking along until we get there. All right. So again, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. You guys have a great rest of your day.